that this is an indictment of us as a leadership in this country, that we are in an extremely difficult place where, if we are not careful, not many countries have gotten to this point and turned back. There are some that 20, 30, 50 years are still trying to turn back, actually, after moments such as this. Therefore, this calls for introspection. This calls for a rethink. This calls for serious empathy on our part as a leader. And I have said this many times on the floor of this House, Mr. Speaker, that the challenges that we face as a country, on many occasions, we have very limited choice. First, in terms of whether to tackle or not, but second and most importantly, on what has been our input as any individual who's in a position of responsibility to get the country to a better space. Therefore, as I begin, Mr. Speaker, I'd wish to personally, and this is at a personal level, not even necessarily as Senator for Kericho, Majority Leader, but just as a leader and somebody who God has granted the opportunity to serve in a position of responsibility in this country, to tender my unreserved apology to the country for, either by commission or omission, everything that I have contributed into getting us into the mess and the place that we are in. I have reflected deeply the last few days, Mr. Speaker, and looked through my own journey as an individual and asked myself very serious questions, trying to wear the shoes of the ordinary citizens and how they feel at this particular moment about me as a person. I don't want to focus about any other individual, whichever office they occupy, but just me, a citizen of this country, that God in his own wisdom granted the opportunity to serve in a place of responsibility, and try to retrace my steps. What is it that perhaps I should have done better? I have to be sincere, Mr. Speaker, that there were days in the night that I contemplated even quitting and said, perhaps maybe other people can do it. But this is not the time to quit, because quitting doesn't solve. It doesn't get us out of the hole that you already are in. If it's about getting out and running away, Mr. Speaker, you first sort the mess that you created. I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, that I know that is the agony that many of our colleagues have thought through. And therefore, just to bring the country up to speed and appreciate why the Senate of the Republic of Kenya is seated this morning, is that we had a session yesterday in the afternoon where we sat down as the Senate of the Republic of Kenya off camera, not in this chamber, but seated somewhere together, and reasoned and said, what is it that we can make as our contribution? We are deeply embarrassed, Mr. Speaker, that it has taken young children to point to us that you are naked as our leaders. Extremely troubling. A moment that, to many of the people that I listened to yesterday in the afternoon as leaders shared their experiences and what has been the last few weeks, I realized that we are in extraordinary times, and ordinary solutions that we have proposed in the past cannot work this time. Unless we are serious, unless we are genuine, unless we are honest, unless we mean it, let us not begin this conversation in this house this morning, Mr. Speaker. And I'd wish to put it on record that I come 100% willing and committed, standing before the Senate and the Republic of Kenya, knowing well that one way or the other, I have made a contribution that I am ready to be persuaded and to be led jointly, first of all, by the leaders that are here and by the things that we are being told by the people that are speaking in the public spaces and the conversation that's going on in the country, Mr. Speaker, on what we need to do to redeem and win back our country.
Bwana Spika, hawa vijana wa Gen Z hawana ukabila, hawana ujamaa, hawana undugu. Wao wanajuana kama Wakenya. Wao wanajuana kama Wakenya ambao ni ndugu moja, ni watu wanaishi pamoja, ni watu nchi yao ni hii Kenya, na hata Kenya ikiharibika hawana nchi nyingine ambao watakimbilia. Kwa hiyo wamekuja kutengeza historia na kurekodi historia kwa sababu wanadai haki zao. Bwana Spika, jambo la kusikitisha, tunaona ya kwamba polisi ambao ni utumishi kwa wote wakiongozwa na Inspector General Kome walitumia nguvu kupita kiasi kuweza kusimamisha maandamano haya ambayo yalisababisha vifo, ambayo yalisababisha watu kuumia. Hivi sasa tunavyoongea kuna watu pengine wamekatwa miguu, wamekatwa mikono, tumbo zao hazijulikani kama watapona namna gani.
I therefore want to open my remarks by passing my profound heartfelt condolences to all Kenyans who lost their lives, who were injured, and whose property was destroyed. Mr. Speaker, I specifically missed to sit in this House on Wednesday last week when I should have, because a woman who has been selling me fried groundnuts and oranges in Kakamega, Caroline Shiramba, was shot dead. She sells outside the office of the governor. Mr. Speaker, equally here in Nairobi, a young man from Malinya was shot dead. So these things have come very close. And for those who thought that this was something for a particular set of Kenyans, when I went to visit the victims at the General Hospital in Kakamega, one of the victims was the son of one of my chiefs. He was at the forefront in Kakamega. You saw even the son of the Attorney General of Kenya was also involved. I saw the son of Honorable my brother Junjuri was involved. I particularly don't know where my children were. Probably they were also involved. The only thing that missed was that they were not captured on camera. Mr. Speaker, where are we? 4 things that are unprecedented have taken place. The first one is that for the first time in the history of this country, the president refused to assent to the finance bill. It is unprecedented. 2, Mr. Speaker, the youth did what they did. Some people call it inversion of parliament. Others call it desegregation of parliament. I don't know what to call it. I can only say they did what they did. Mr. Speaker, never in the history of the 4 presidents we have had in this country have they ever contemplated on deploying the military the way we did. Mr. Speaker, finally, you saw across the whole country members of the public torching homes and properties of elected leaders. We are indeed in a bad place, and therefore, as we say in our community, when you are mourning, you don't mourn with shame. We must speak to it, as I wish to do now. Mr. Speaker, we are where we are today because Kenyans hate and are angry with the ongoings in the country. And if we don't speak to them and take action, we will go nowhere. It was never the finance bill. It was simply that the finance bill was a trigger. Why? Because public servants, led by ministers, are very, Mr. Speaker, corrupt. And people hate this, and people are angry. Yesterday, colleagues, I was called by a minister whose name I don't wish to bring on the floor because it's not necessary. And he was very angry with me for the position that I have taken, especially over the weekend in Nabaholo, over corruption in the cabinet. He told me very many strong and bad things. Because people who the other day we were working with here want to think because the Constitution has given them a different office as opposed to the offices as ourselves we have been given, they are therefore in high heaven, they should be worshipped. Nobody should mention their name, even when they are wrong. Mr. Speaker, people are angry and hate public servants because of our own making. The public display of wealth and opulence, unless members of the public can quickly see where you've gotten it, they will not be happy.
Speaker, we are hearing a lot of things from young people, from our constituents, and we cannot pretend that the things that these people are saying don't make sense to us. These things are sensible. I want to address myself as a speaker to 3 issues in that motion. First, Mr. Speaker, is on the Finance Bill 2024-2025, which was a monster that triggered the crisis that this country finds itself in. If the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, had listened to the people, we would not be where we are today. The young people on the streets are the true patriots, people driven by a deep sense of love for their country. They don't want their country to go to the dogs.
I met one member of National Assembly, decided to remove the entire suit and wear a vest and a boxer to escape the rat, Mr. Speaker, through Landimawe, Mr. Speaker, in this city. While those are tactics that people evaded what was happening in that day, Mr. Speaker, it is not a justification to deny media access. My colleagues has put it, we know, Mr. Speaker, when I raised an issue of opulence of some of the cabinet ministers, I was blasted, I was accused of being jealous, I was accused of not knowing how to do deals. Mr. Speaker, I was accused of coming to take tea and mandazi in parliament instead of going to Tanzania and other countries to broker deals, Mr. Speaker, which is very unfortunate. And I was just calling out, don't eat too much and vomit before the feet of Kenyans. As a former ambassador would say, Mr. Speaker, even in my culture, where I come from, you don't eat and open your shirt. And I warn them that if this trend of displaying opulence by members of parliament and some cabinet ministers without humility, and I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, for the last 2 weekends, at least the quality of hair has improved. Because when choppers were crisscrossing, it was also affecting our agenda of climate change, Mr. Speaker, where people would fly in, land, reorganize the program of a funeral or a church service, speak, insult other elected leaders, Mr. Speaker, call them dimwits, call them fools, the way I was being called in Nandi last year, give out the money that God knows where they got it from, millions of shillings They fly away from the chopper, disrupting, Mr. Speaker, a social function for the next 1 hour or 30 minutes, Mr. Speaker, until they settle, Mr. Speaker. So the issue of corruption, and I think, Mr. Speaker, as a proposal to the President and EACC, Mr. Speaker, we must start doing lifestyle audits to all of us, state officers and all governors. Any person who is serving in a public office, we must do lifestyle audit.
There is something very profound that the majority leader told me yesterday. He said, Sifuna, right now, there are no more political goals to be scored. There isn't even a political game now going on because all of us in the political class are actually indicted by the people of this republic that we have failed in terms of what we need to do to get this country where it's supposed to be. So imagine you being a doctor or a lawyer, you have nothing to do with parliament, driving around the city and people attack you because of the car that you're driving. It is a problem that we have to solve. By our own conduct, we have put all of us in the line of fire.
I look at the trend. If you look at independence 1962-3, that was the 20 years beyond where the liberation movement took place. After that, we got independence. It took another 20 years for us to have a military coup. The people who are guiding and who are within that military coup are not old men like Jaramogi or Charles Njonjo at that time. It was young Gen Z students of the University of Nairobi and young people who believed in the ideal of what Kenya was. The second issue that came up, Madam Speaker, was after, by the year 2002, there was another 20 years. Then you come to 2002 is when Kibaki was elected, is when we have a referendum, is when we have a new constitution, and then we say Kenya is now on the right path. After that, Madam Speaker, we did not follow the letter of the constitution. What many of us have never understood is that your democracy is as valid and as reasonable and as verifiable and is implementable as the people who are willing to follow and implement that constitution. We have completely failed our people. And that is why when the elections took over and we had challenges, and that is why when you look at our country and the crisis that has come up, when you look at the issues which are bedeviling our country, you realize that we are on quicksand. Unless you have old men and old women, people of dignity and decency, people who have got wisdom, people who are not greedy to fix this country, we will not have a country very soon. Madam Speaker, I've served as an assistant minister. I went to Cote d'Ivoire, sent by President Kibaki to go and visit President Gbagbo. I got into his house. He was wearing a vest. That time the military was around him. He was being deposed. 2 weeks later, he went home with his wife. They were half naked. Those sins are not sins that Africa should be proud of. Madam Speaker, our country has broken down. Our country has challenges. But before I go to how, in a short notice, what we can do, I would like to ask the President, and I asked him the other day, the children who died and the children who are in the prisons, please remove them. Those who have died, I want to ask this House, the Senate, let us make sure that those children get a state funeral. Those who are not criminals, these are children who had reached a dead end. Madam Speaker, what is wrong with our country? We call it a company with shareholders. Our country is not a company. Our company is Kenya, which is a state. It has 50 million people who all expect and demand certain services from the state. We, the politicians in this House, I heard my colleague speak. I am so happy that we are now telling each other the truth. We are the ones who carry militias. We are the ones who go and carry cattle rustlers. We are the ones who have got companies that are doing business in government departments. We are the ones who are stealing the money. Look at the national government, call it down, bring it down to the National Assembly. We must begin to look at issues like CDF. We must look at the Women Fund. We must look at the structure. Do we need all the people who have been given offices? I've been asking this publicly, why are governors running county governments as if they are private companies where they are stealing money, buying properties abroad, driving such big vehicles, including ourselves? When did we decide that I must drive a car which is 4.8 cc, that at 3,000 cc is not good enough? When our children don't have medicines, when our women are not giving birth, when we can't feed our children, when we buy fertilizer, we deal on it, we sell some of it, we sell mchanga. We are bringing in maize when we are supposed to be planting maize and giving farmers fertilizers and giving them funds so that we can get production and increase that, so that we create jobs for our people. It is we politicians who won't buy 2 million metric tons of maize. We come and sell. We bring 3 million metric tons of sugarcane. Mumias is dying. Chemelil is dying. Sony Sugar is dying. Those are factories that used to employ people. Who are the biggest dealers of investment companies in Kenya? We, the political class. What happened to Kenya Airways? Look at it now. It's smelly, filthy. It was the pride of Africa. Who runs Kenya Power? Why are we not told who are the owners of the independent power suppliers of this country? Why are we not being told who owns our national parks? But you hear money is being stolen by none other than the elite and the political class. These people out here are tired. These people are tired. I was crying this morning today because we are messing up a good thing. We are messing up this country. Who wants to be a refugee? And there's enough for you people to eat, so long as you eat with manners. The revenue we collect is enough to run 8 African countries: Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania. You go to Congo, you go to South Sudan, you go to Somalia, and you go to Ethiopia. That's what our goddamn budget is. Just manage it, don't steal it. A few people are stealing too much. These kids out here, they know everything. They know your houses. They know where your kids go to school. They know which properties of land you have. Why must somebody have 4 million acres of land to his name? What happened to our mentality? Then we pretend and run to churches talking about Christianity, how Jesus... Do you understand what you are dealing with?